That night, so this is the same night, I don't know when this banquet was held, it must have been sometime in the afternoon. Haman went home and he had this gallows built, but then the night when the king went to bed, that night the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. The king is one of those guys who thinks it's a good idea to go to sleep while someone's reading a history book. He's one of those kinds of people. He can't sleep. Best cure for insomnia is to have someone read some history to him. It was found, recorded there, that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guard the doorway. They were the bodyguards. You know, that monumental relief I talked about Darius sitting on his throne with Xerxes next to him and this huge scepter in his hand. Well, there were guys behind him who would have been his bodyguards. That's probably who these two were. Not those two guys, but that's what these guys would have been, was bodyguards. Two of the king's officers who guard the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, the attendants answered. The king said, so he's thinking, it's like, that's a problem. We better do something for this guy. But at that moment, he has a distraction. Who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had erected for him. So Haman has just gotten back from his house, where he stuck that pole in the ground, ready for Mordecai's body to be put on top of it, impaled on it. And he's ready to go into the king and ask for permission about that. I want to kill Mordecai and impale him on this post. Right at the moment that the king is thinking about honoring Mordecai for having saved his life earlier. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king replied. When Haman entered, the king asked him, rhetorically, by the way, he doesn't give any names here, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there but me that the king would rather honor? Who is there the king would rather honor than me? So he's going to be talking about himself. The king is not thinking about Haman here. The Haman thinks the king is thinking about him, so he's going to be talking about himself here. So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse to the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. So Haman would just love to get this parade to the streets and have everyone cheer him and congratulate him for being such a great guy. Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So if the king says to Haman, that's a great idea. In fact, it's such a great idea, you can be the one to go get Mordecai and put the robe on him and put him on the horse and go around town and tell people that he's being honored by the king. That's a great idea. So Haman, he had to have hated this. This would have been the most humiliating thing. Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights on. This had to have been the next day. This whole scene about the king reading from the books at night, that happened at night. I don't know what time of the night. Haman apparently came to the king after the king had gone to bed, and I guess he either thought he would still be awake or he planned to wake him up, which I think would be kind of risky, but because the king had gone to bed and couldn't sleep, which is why he was still awake. So, I don't know. But this had to have been the following day, because apparently the encounter between the king and Haman was pretty late at night. So the whole robing Mordecai and parading him around the streets had to have been the following day. So he rode Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate. But Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief, and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Oh, this is just the most humiliating thing. Could anything be worse than this? Well, yeah, something can be worse than this, and he's going to find out very soon. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. This would be sometime that afternoon, I guess. So he must have paraded Mordecai around in the early part of the day, and then the banquet was scheduled for that afternoon or evening. This is the second of these banquets. And Haman has not really had time to prepare because he's still in mourning after the shame he experienced having to treat his enemy with honor like this. They apparently knew, by this is 474 BC or something like that, and by this point in time, the Hebrews as a people group had been distinct for 1,000 plus years. They came out of Egypt a long time ago. They've been living in the land, and they got cursed and had to leave the land, and they came back. And there seems to be enough awareness of them amongst the people of this world at this time that they know that when you pick a fight with the Jews, if you better either knock them out right away like Babylon did, or you're going to have trouble. It's like getting involved in a conflict with the Jews doesn't tend to work out well for those who fight the Jews, and they seem to have acknowledged that here by saying that there's no way Haman's going to be able to win his or fight with Mordecai. Mordecai is just going to overcome him in the end. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and as they were drinking wine on that second day, so again the king is drunk with wine again, as he always is, the king again asked, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life." This is what she's asking for. This is what she spent all this time now preparing for. "Grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request." Apparently the petition and the request were two separate things. They're being counted as like separate asks here. I don't know what the difference would have been, but I guess we're referring to two separate things. "For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation." If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. So basically, if we had been put back in captivity like we were before, they're free people now. Okay? When the Persians came, they set free the people they had inherited, the captive peoples that they inherited from Babylon, including the Jews, and I don't know what other groups it would have been. But they set free those people and said you can go back to your land. Now they haven't. Esther and Mordecai had not gone back to Judah and Jerusalem. But they could. There's nothing. Well, Esther can't now. She's the queen. She's stuck here. But like before this, they could have. They didn't have to be in Susa. So they were free people. So you're basically saying, if we were to be made slaves again, I wouldn't have bothered you. But because we're being set for annihilation, I've got to say something. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." He was right there with them. Now Haman didn't know Esther's background until now. He didn't know until now that the queen was a Jew and was related to Mordecai. This is probably the reason why Mordecai... I don't know if Mordecai foresaw this happening. But I believe the reason why Mordecai told her to hide her background and her association with him, because they knew he was a Jew, was to keep Haman from just uncovering the link between Esther and Mordecai. That's my belief. I don't think it was because there was a spirit of general anti-Jewishness at that point in time. I don't see any indication that that was the case at this time. I think Haman had a problem with Mordecai, and Haman was already around as a prominent person even before he gets introduced in chapter 3. And Mordecai knew that, and knew that he could be a problem for Esther if Haman, knew about Esther's connection with him, Mordecai, and his people. So I think that's the reason, ultimately. So Haman has not known until now that Esther is a Jew. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. So he is so angry he can't even finish his drink. He has to go out and cool off for a moment out in the palace garden. Ever been that way? Ever seen the whole that way before? You've gotten so angry, you've seen so angry that you can't even speak. Like you're just so, you have to just go somewhere and cool down before you're even capable of forming a thought or a sentence. That's what the king is like right now. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, it's weird how much we're reading into Haman's mind here. Haman, of course, is the villain, and he gets put to death here. And there's no way that Haman would have ever told Mordecai or any Jew what he was thinking, so that this book could record his inner thoughts like this. But it's interesting how, of all the characters, Haman is the one that we're getting the most insight into how he thinks. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. Now, in this day and time, when they had their banquets, they ate on couches. Now we eat while sitting on chairs, but they ate all on these couches. In Jesus' day, they have tables near the floor, and they recline at the floor and eat. In this day and time, they have tables up against their couches, and they're leaning back on their couches to eat. Or at least the rich people are. I don't know if the poor people are, but the nobility is. So Esther has some kind of a couch that she's lying on to eat, or she's reclining on to eat. And Haman is there somehow like prostrating himself before her to beg for his life. Now this is dangerous for Haman just in general. Again, the king's wives were kept very separate. Even Mordecai, who is Esther's cousin, can't really go near her at this point. She's off like in her own little area of the palace, and the only males she sees on a regular basis are the eunuchs, and Haman is not one of those. So Haman doesn't have permission to be there with her, certainly not after the king has left the room. So he's in danger simply being in the same room as Esther at the same time, let alone prostrating himself in front of her to beg for his life, or somehow even falling on the couch where she is. I don't think he's trying to rape her or anything like that. But he somehow is positioning himself at her feet, prostrating himself to beg for her mercy. And the king comes in and sees this, and this is another thing that Haman's done to me. This is another charge against Haman. So as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in my house?" It's like, how wicked is this guy? He's going to attack the queen while she's here in my banquet hall with me? That's how bold and brazen and wicked this man is? Of course, that's actually not what he's doing, but as soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. I don't know who this they is. It could be a reference to his words. Covering the face means condemning that person. Haman covered his face earlier when he was rushing home after being humiliated in this parade. Having your face covered means you're being humiliated or condemned. Even to this day, we put bags on. When you have hostage videos, and you have a bag on the hostage's head, or when you hang people, actually like hanging by the neck, you put a bag on their head. I mean, even today, there's this idea of covering a condemned person's face or hiding someone's face in shame. There have been times when people who get arrested or who are being let out on their perp walks will try to cover their face if they can while they're being let out on their perp walks. So the idea of covering your face in shame is still prevalent. It's still part of our culture today. Maybe not like as formal as it was back then. So it could be a reference to the words, like symbolically, figuratively covering Haman's face, or that they could be referring to just people, bodyguards around the area, and they rush in and bag Haman's face and carry him off. I'm not really clear. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A gallows 75 feet high, stands by Haman's house. He had made it for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, "Hang him on it!" So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Haman has been defeated, but there is still a problem lingering, because the decree to eliminate and annihilate the Jews has not been rescinded, and can't be rescinded. So we still have a problem, so we still have a few more chapters left in this book. The villain has been defeated, but the problem that he started is still not been solved.